There could be a painless way to fix inflation. Modern problems demand modern solutions. Sometimes we need to allow things to play out before making decisions, as they can turn out to be disastrous. The current hike in interest rates isn't necessary and would have been better off being left alone. Must recession always accompany a period of high inflation? Are there ways to fix inflation without making Americans feel the harshness? Welcome to Global Economic Drops, where we bring you simple summaries of important daily and weekly economic news from around the world. Our mission is to simplify the economy and help you navigate the treacherous waters facing investors today. So before we get into today's videos, hit the subscribe button and turn on post notifications by clicking the bell icon. And if you find our news briefs valuable, don't forget to hit the like button. Leave a comment down below telling us just what you think is going on in the state of the world. And share the video with a friend or two so that you can all stay updated together. Thanks for watching. Now let's get into it. The November midterms are drawing closer, and inflation is topping the priority list for most voters. 77% of voters have concerns about the economy. The Fed Chairman, Jerome Powell, in a meeting said, "While higher interest rates, slower growth, and softer labor market conditions will bring down inflation, they will also bring some pain to households and businesses. These are the unfortunate costs of reducing inflation. But a failure to restore price stability would mean far greater pain." Unlike the Fed chairman, some people believe the painless way to fight inflation is to stop the rise in interest rates. The current interest rate is at 3.25%, and there are forecasts by experts that it could get to 4.4% by year's end and 4.6% in 2023. These increases are a way to get inflation to 2% from the current rate of 8.3%. A lot of economists blame inflation on government spending done mainly to offset the effect of the pandemic. In 2020 and 2021, we saw a total stimulus of $5 trillion injected into the economy. These, unlike past stimuli, put money in the hands of individuals and small businesses. It was quite unusual and set the pace for the economic situation we face today. The US isn't the only one facing high inflation rates. Germany and other countries are seeing record high inflation, and these majority stem from the following factors. Government spending. The pandemic and lockdown brought about hardship to a vast majority of the population. To cushion the effect, governments around the world gave stimulus. These checks brought a lot of money into circulation and kick-started the rise in inflation. Too much pent-up demand. During the lockdown, individuals found it difficult to get their hands on products they needed. When lockdown restrictions were lifted, there was a sharp rise in demand that supply couldn't meet. This higher demand with so little supply brought an increase in prices. Inaction by the Fed. When inflation started climbing, the Fed described it as transitory and didn't do anything to address it. When it got out of control, that's when they stepped in. The Russia-Ukraine war. The war, which brought about a ban on Russian exports, brought a rise in gas prices. It also caused a scarcity of wheat and corn and their corresponding increase in prices. Some of these can be easily fixed, like government spending and supply chain bottlenecks. The war, however, is also impossible. As a way to fix what can be fixed, the government is raising rates very rapidly and trying to induce a recession. But do we always need to use the old script? In 1970, Paul Volcker was appointed chairman of the Fed when policymakers couldn't tame the stagflation. He took the interest rate to a recession-inducing 22% and paved the way for economic prosperity in the 80s and 90s. This has slowly become the norm in fighting inflation by central banks, as they believe inflation gives rise to political unraveling. They take aggressive measures to cool down the labor market and financial markets and cause a recession. Why put people in an economic crisis? And does unchecked inflation truly become harder to resolve? The last 2 years weren't like others. From the pandemic to the stimulus that put money in the hands of individuals, there hasn't been anything usual about the economic climate. After easing the lockdowns and injecting more money into the economy, we start seeing a rise in prices. In May 2021, we have a reading of 5%, which grew to 7.5% at the start of the war and peaked at 9.1% before reducing. Then Russia's invasion of Ukraine happened and the economy went out of control. The Fed's increase in rates is doing more harm than good. Inflation dropped 0.9%, but it wasn't because of the increase in interest rates. When policies such as increased interest rates occur, there is usually some time lag before it starts to manifest in spending patterns. As such, inflation is moderating on its own as the effects of the stimulus checks, Ukraine invasion, and supply chain bottlenecks wear off. The decision of the Fed to force a recession as a way to fight off inflation playing by history books. The Fed initially had plans to wait off the rise of inflation, calling it transitory, but many economic experts came with criticism. They believed that the pandemic created an unusual situation and didn't want to raise rates. In a bid to pander to critics, they are now ready to force a recession as the necessary medicine. The conditions today are different from previous inflationary periods as we see exceptionally low levels of unemployment and high levels of demand. The Fed could have waited to see how these conditions would play out as the stimulus was digested. These are totally different situations and might have played out a lot differently. In a bid to play by the old script, they end up making destructive mistakes. It should have waited rather than having to burn the village in a bid to save it. Do you feel the Fed should not have interfered in fighting inflation? What are your thoughts on the hardships households are facing as a result of rising rates?